Okay, YouTubers, I've got a couple of new Gigapans up here for you today to have a look at, and they're all linked up to various videos and images, and you can get the original images from here if you click on this little link next to where it says Caltech. That will take you to the original image set, so you can download them yourself and check that this is all real. These are all bona fide NASA images from the Curiosity rover. I've got this Gigapan here with what I've called the cyclops. Now, unfortunately, I called it the cyclops a long time ago. Now, having done a bit more research over the last couple of days on this, I no longer think that this is actually a cyclops with one eye. I think it has two eyes. But there's also this other Gigapan, which I'm going to show you briefly as well, here, from Sol 78. And this is the giant crab, which I published only about a week or two ago, a couple of weeks ago. And there's links to the video here as well. So links to all this stuff will be in the description below, and you can click on the Gigapan, and the Gigapan will then link you to the videos for each thing in turn, okay? So first of all, let's look at this one. Now this is Sol 952. This is only a section of Sol 952. This particular Gigapan is huge, but I've just taken the sort of lower section where we have this kind of little gully here. And in the middle of the gully, near the back, we have this head, right? Now, I actually found this about 5 or 6 years ago. I originally published it back then. And here, there's a link here to the original video here, which is called Mars Cyclops Statue. And that was quite some time ago I did this. But what I've done, this image was initially taken from someone else's Gigapan, I think one done by NASA, which was very dark, and I had to brighten it up a lot. But this time I've done my own Gigapan, and we've got the raw Gigapan here, which is as the images are, unprocessed, right? And you can see it a bit more clearly here because it's not too dark. And I've got a processed one up here where it's been color corrected and had the contrast stretched. But it's a little bit dark. But what you can see here is the eye just here, and the nose, and you can see the big ear sticking out and the sort of slightly conical shaped head. But you're better off actually looking at the close-ups because this won't zoom right in. So I've got a close-up of it here. Now if we compare the two, now this was taken from a much darker image, and it had been rotated, I think, by NASA, the original Gigapan. And when I darkened it, this eye did appear, which I enhanced. There is an eye, a very vague pupil in this image, but when I did it from the raw image here, which I've done, that didn't appear. Okay, so that may have been an image artifact or just a fault. There is a slight hint of it here, just about make out a hint of it there, but this is much lighter. I'm sure if I darken this enough, it would gradually appear just there. But this is much more detailed because I've taken it from the raw image, and I was a lot more careful to lighten it much more gently, as to not destroy the detail in the image. And what we can see here much more clearly is the nose, nostril and mouth detail, as well as the ear, the very, very large ear sticking out there. And it's just crazy. And it looks very much like some of the Olmec heads that you see in Central America, okay, like these. Now these are quite mysterious. They're very large. The one on Mars we're looking at is only about 2 feet across, or 2 feet high. But these are quite huge. Some of them are sort of 8 feet or 10 feet tall. Some of them are smaller, but generally they're very large. And there's dozens and dozens of them in Central America and in places like Mexico. The Olmec culture were pre-Mayan and pre-Aztec, and go right back many thousands of years to about 3000 BC, I think. May go back even further. They're a very mysterious tribe, and some people have equated them to an African tribe, which they may be linked to, of course. And some of them do look very African, but some of them do look like the locals. Here's an image here of somebody, one of the local people that really kind of looks very similar to one of these Olmec statues. So there's probably all sorts of things going on here. Some of them even look Asian from perhaps Japan or China or the Philippines or something like that as well. What it does seem is that the ancient Olmecs on Earth, at least, were a trading culture and traded with many people from across the world, including Asia and possibly Africa as well. So they were a real mix of cultures, I think, and they're still very mysterious, and some of them do look really quite crazy. And most of them seem to be wearing these flying helmets, and were possibly able to fly. I know that sounds crazy, but lots of artifacts have been found in the area, little model aircraft and things which look like little aeroplanes and rockets and things like that in this part of the world. And they've been shown on Ancient Aliens many times. I'm not going to go through all those now, but I just thought I'd show you that because the facial features are quite similar to what we're looking at today on Mars, here. But this is nowhere near as big. So that was interesting, and I managed to get a bit more mouth detail out of this. Now the question is this a carving? I think it probably is. But there's not really enough detail to say one way or the other. If we could get really close to it and have a close-up in detail, then we could tell, hopefully, one way or the other. But it's just a little bit on the edge of the visual range of the camera, which is quite low res. But in this version, I managed to find that there is another eye here. It's just very pale and not very pronounced. So it's not a one-eyed statue or cyclops like I called it initially here, back 5 or 6 years ago. And there does seem to be another eye there. So that was interesting. So check this Gigapan out. There's another thing here which I call the gargoyle, just here. And they're all marked on the Gigapan, so you can follow the marks. The gargoyle's right over here. Just here. And it's pretty clear actually. It's in a bit of shadow, but it's quite well lit up on one side. So you can see the shape of it. But you're better off looking at the close-ups really down here, or clicking on the video link to it as well. There should be a link here to the original video, which will show you some nice real close-ups and enhancements, and it tells you all about it. So all these things have been covered, and they have been studied quite closely for years by myself. So do check out these links. Now the other Gigapan I wanted to show you, there was also this one. This is a new one which I found just yesterday as I was working on this Gigapan. There's one in the background here, but it's all in shadow. This is another cone head type head with a nose sticking out. Let's go in a bit closer. There's a nose sticking out there, there's two eyes and a mouth, and you can see the sort of bottom lip detail sticking out there. And it seems to be wearing a sort of hat or helmet in a sort of slightly pointed cone head shape there. Okay, but this is right at the back by these other things up here, and is in almost complete shadow just there. I've marked it just there. Possible head, it looks like one. And there are lots in the area. In fact, there's loads of statues in this area. I mean, it's littered with them. And this thing even may be a broken one here, who knows. But basically, you wouldn't know that was a head until you took a clip of it and brightened it up like I did. You just wouldn't know. So often these things don't make any sense until you take a clip like this here and brighten it right up. This thing here, I think it's another head, but it's smashed. Now, whether this was actually a person or a carving, I think it was actually a person. And I've got a clip of it here, just here. You can see in the raw clip that there's an eye and another eye there, or what looked like eyes. And this, I think, was a helmet coming up here. And the helmet's broken. You've got the top of the helmet here, the edge of the helmet there. And this is the other edge of the helmet, like a cheek guard, which is broken off. And this may have come up to here, more rounded, or to a slight point, like that. Okay, here's the enhancement. Now you can see I've brightened it right up considerably to see the detail, and I've added a little bit of contrast as well. But you can see the same details in the raw clip here. They're all there, but because it's in shadow, it's hard to see, so you have to brighten it up. And we got an eye and another eye. So I actually think this head came up to more of a point or an oval shape here, and what we've got was a head in a helmet, and the helmet is also smashed. Now, whether this was a carving of a person in a helmet and it's smashed, or an actual person in a helmet, I couldn't tell you. There's not enough detail in the image really to tell either way, because we're too far off from it really. But that was interesting anyway. So this is one I've been looking at for many years, and I've always thought this was very strange. but I lightened it much more carefully this time and got a bit more detail out of it. But it is only just on the edge of our visual range. When you look at the actual Gigapan, it's a bit far back. We've got the Olmec or cyclops head here, and then it's just adjacent to it here, and it's about the same size. So this is also about 2 feet across. It may be a bit less than that. This may be sort of 18 inches or 16 inches. I don't know exactly. Ignore the ruler guide on all my Gigapans. This is utter garbage, this thing. It only works if you put a special code into it and stuff, and then it encodes the image and then gives you a scale. These are not scaled. So if it says it's only half an inch or 0.05 of an inch, ignore it, because that's not true. Okay? And the same goes for all my Gigapans on the Gigamacro site. None of the scales on the ruler are accurate. So you've got to go by either what I say in the description or look at the rover tracks and measure it from that. So we've got 3 there. We got that dark cone head at the back. We've got the smashed head here, which looks like a head in a helmet. And we've got the Olmec head here. Okay, so we've got 3 in a row, and then up in the corner we have what I've called the gargoyle head here. And there are loads more in the surrounding areas, which I will be showing in coming videos soon, okay? Now the other Gigapan I wanted to show you was this one. Now I did a video about this also a couple of weeks back, the giant crab. And I'm just going to zoom in and show you. This thing's huge, right? This is about 2 feet tall, but we're much closer to it. So we've got much better detail. And if I show you the enhancements down here, you get even more detail. I'll zoom into that. This there. Now, this is from the video I did a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this was taken from a black and white image, right? So there's less colour, obviously distortion in it, because sometimes the colours do get very odd looking and can actually make it much harder to look at these images. This was taken from a black and white image from Sol 60, which was a bit earlier. The main one here is Sol 78, but the rover hadn't moved much at all during that time and was just scanning the whole area. And in this one, because of the way the light's hitting it, you can actually see the shape of it much better. Even though there's less detail, you can actually see the legs here. You've got one leg here, one here, and another one here holding something, right? That looks like a little animal, but it may not be. I did say that in the video. Also, I put here, this wannabe rock here is probably part of this leg, which is broken off, because they're in sections. This is some kind of crustacean or arthropod from the arthropod family, which is all creatures with exoskeletons, which includes things like lobsters and crabs and spiders and everything else, and insects. So we've got 3 legs here. This one is more like an arm. We've got 2 other legs, and I would assume that it would be the same on the other side. But this is partially buried and may go down into the ground about another foot. So there may be more legs down here and body buried in the actual sand, and we're only seeing the top part. But this is extraordinary, and it absolutely blew my mind when I found this not so long ago. And it's very hard to get your head round. This is the head, and the head goes right back round like this. We've got 2 eyes, we've got what looks like a kind of nose area, and this is the mouth, and what looks a bit like some kind of creature that is holding and eating, or holding or something. And even more strange, take notice of these little things around the neck area. This is the head at the top, and it's jointed here, and we've got these little, well, they're like little skulls. And if you look in here, you can actually see them a bit more closely. I don't think they are skulls here, but they look a bit like them. And you can see a lot more detail here, and this is from a different angle, much better lit up and in colour. And you can actually see some eye detail here, and the other eye here, mouth detail here. We're looking down from above slightly, so we're seeing down onto it rather than straight across. This one was taken from further back and from lower down, because this is on like a little hill or mound, and basically this was taken from lower down, so we're not seeing down onto it, we're looking across at it. This one's looking down onto it, so we're seeing slightly from above, because the rover's pretty tall. The mast cam is about 7 foot up, and it's looking down on it, so we're seeing more detail from above and less from underneath. Okay, and if you compare the two, let's try and get them both on screen here. Let's get them lined up. There we are. You can actually see a lot more shape in this one because of the way the light's hitting it. So the shadows are actually highlighting the shapes of these legs, which are very much like what you would see on a spider crab or a lobster or something like that. So it's some kind of crustacean, arthropod, and it's very large. This thing is about 2 feet across, and it may go down another foot down into the sand, perhaps. And I would imagine there'd be another leg down there, okay? At least one more leg, and the body coming down here. Very interesting indeed, absolutely insane. And one of my subscribers actually sent me a very interesting image to look at with this, to compare it to. And it's from a culture in South America, from Peru. Now this is a piece of gold artwork. And this blew my mind, because not only is it a crab with what looks like a human head, but it also has these weird little skull-like things in a necklace around its neck here, like the thing we just looked at. Okay, absolutely insane. Now this is from the Moche culture from Peru. I've got a page up here. I'll just briefly show you this. Links will be below for all these things. The Moche culture were around between AD 100 and AD 700, so they weren't around for that long. And this is the part of Peru where they lived, their influence. And they had these amazing pieces of art. Basically, they were very good at metalwork and gold and ceramics and that kind of thing, like many of the Central and South American cultures were. Really, really good at ceramics and gold work and stuff, metalwork. And they had these really strange kind of masks and stuff which kind of look similar to some of the things we're seeing on Mars, very similar. This is a bronze and shell Moche mask. So they got some very interesting stuff, and it looks similar to some of the things we're seeing on Mars, as do many of the things from Central and South America, as well as Egypt, ancient Egypt. Now, this is another picture of that crab kind of god or deity. Really interesting. But that was really interesting, and they got some amazing metalwork and ceramics here. Really interesting and detailed, incredible, and some of it looks really alien. Like a lot of the Mexican art, they've got depictions of aliens and stuff, as well as the ancient alien art you see in ancient Egyptian art. You see depictions of spacemen and aliens and all sorts of crazy flying machines, that kind of thing. So there is some kind of link there, and I do think the ancient Olmecs or the Mayans were trading with the ancient Egyptians, mainly because they found Olmec or Mayan glyphs in Egypt. Okay, so there was some kind of trade. They were selling drugs to them, basically. They were selling drugs to the Egyptians, and the priests were using it, and probably the kings and queens as well. So, and drugs, evidence for this has been found in some of the mummies in Egypt, where they've taken samples from them and found traces of marijuana and cocaine and all sorts of other interesting chemicals. Okay, there are sort of modern depictions of this thing as well. Someone here has done a sort of modern version of what they think this deity would have looked like. Yeah, Peruvian artist erect statue of reptilian god. Not reptilian though, because reptiles don't have this many legs, so it's not a reptilian god, so that's wrong. This is a crustacean god or a crab god or something. But it was really interesting because this kind of ties together some of the things we're seeing on Mars. And I do think that if the ancient Olmecs and Mayans were trading with the Egyptians, it is possible they were also trading with the Martians and were flying around. And this may explain why we see in some of these pictures, we see some of these carvings with what look like space helmets and stuff like that. There are examples of some wearing what looks like breathing gear and a kind of space helmet, and there are lots of these. In the art, and there's even sort of people in flying machines that have been done. You would have seen all this on Ancient Aliens if you've seen any of those episodes. Really fascinating, this stuff. So it does seem that they had some kind of flying technology, and this may mean they may have come from Mars. This is another famous image here, which I've used in some of my videos, and I have found a lot of statues that do look like Olmec or Mayan in design and facial features, and also I found a lot on Mars that look Hindu. And quite a few that look Egyptian as well. So there was some cross-pollinization going on here between various cultures on Earth and possibly on Mars at the same time. This is a possibility. Now, I can't prove that it was at the same time, but the artwork and a lot of the things we're seeing on Mars do look very much like some of the things we see depicted on Earth. And this cannot be a coincidence. It's very unlikely that these cultures came up with the same designs and same ideas and same gods and same artwork and styles and things like this independently. There must have been some kind of communication, at least, between these cultures. They may not have actually flown to each other, but they may have been able to communicate using ancient technology of some sort. The pyramids were creating electricity, and it's possible they were able to communicate with them. And what was that power used for? Was it just to light up the streets? I doubt it. There was a higher purpose to a lot of these things, and I do think that they were communicating. And Tesla, in fact, over 100 years ago, claimed to have communicated with people from Mars and got radio signals from them. And later experiments were done in the 1930s, I think, where they shut all the radios down in North America and they actually communicated with Mars and got a reply, okay, via radio. And they actually invented a fax machine to translate the radio signal into an image, which looks very much like some of the Martians I've shown. So this stuff is all linked, and I do think that the cultures are linked, even though at the closest point Mars is 37 million miles away. It is possible that there was some kind of communication going on in the distant past as well as not so long ago, perhaps. So there we are, another head, one of many, and a lot of people are still asking why are there just heads lying around. Well, I did do a video a while back, a couple of months back, called Human Leg Found on Mars. Now, it may not be human, but it's human sized, okay? And in this video it does go into some detail about why I think we're only seeing heads. Now, heads are large and round and are more likely to stay on top of the sand, whereas things like bones, small bones and legs and limbs and things like that are more likely to be dragged off and eaten. And this one here has been partially eaten here. You can see it here, okay? You can see the toes, you can see the knee here, but the thigh here, which should come around like this to here, has been bitten off. And in this particular area there are reptile skulls and lots of other animal skulls as well, which means it was probably predated upon. But I think a lot of them were buried and mummified in some of these areas. And in fact, in this video, it shows you what looks like another burial mound or dolmen type structure where a lot of these mummies were probably buried. Okay, and as if to confirm that on Mars, in this image, now the main thing on this is the crab, but the weird thing is we also have a mummified person here. Now I'm going to show you where this mummified person is. The mummified person is just by this big boulder up here, this kind of rocky outcrop, which in itself looks very interesting. And when you go down here, we have a tiny, tiny little person in a sitting position, sitting mummy. Now in Peru, they had sitting mummies. In many ancient cultures, they used to bury people in a sitting position, mummify them, and wrap them in a sort of a basic shroud and just put a few rocks around them and cover them up in a little mound. Or they would have a little square structure with rocks. Okay, so this may have been a burial here, but it's eroded. Now, you can't see a lot of detail here, so you need to look at the enlargement of it down here. Now, the crazy thing is that this little mummy is nowhere near as big as this giant crab. So that throws some very interesting things into the mix here. This little tiny mummy, which was found by Terry Burnett in 2018, October the 10th, a brilliant find, absolutely one of my favourites. I've done a few videos on this, and you can link to those here. We have a tiny, spindly little mummified person here, with tiny little thin arms. This hand is broken off here, sat in the sand, in what looks a bit like a cross-legged position, perhaps. But the legs are not there. They're either buried or they've broken off. And we've got a head with what looks like a little turban or hair tied back, and a nose and two sort of eyes there, and some complex little bony parts here, which it's all kind of withered away and wind eroded, but holding, with a wrist sticking out here and fingers and thumb, holding this object which looks a bit like a dead creature here. If you go in too close, you can't see it very well. Just here. This looks like some bony material or remains of some kind of creature, perhaps. I don't know exactly. It's hard to make out what it is. But basically we have a tiny little mummy. This is about 3 or 4 inches tall. Now, if this thing was stood up, it would be probably only about 9 inches, right? 8 or 9 inches, if this was stood up. So that is one of the crazy things about Mars. We have a real scale issue here. We have a giant crab here, which is possibly about 2 feet across by 2 feet-ish tall, but maybe bigger than that because it's partially buried, like this thing. A lot of these things are half buried. So this may go right down into the ground and come down to about here, with more legs. I would imagine there'd be at least one more leg on this, because if it's a crab-type creature, it should have a certain number of legs, according to our specifications on Earth, of course. Okay, so this is crazy. So you have a tiny mummy here, which is literally about 3 or 4 inches in height, and a giant crab in the same area. And this thing is huge. Absolutely enormous, really. And it is insane. So I do recommend you watch the video. There's a link to it there. There's links all over these things for you to check. And it links to the original image sets and everything. It's all verified and all linking back to the original NASA images as well. And of course I give full credit to Terry for this find. Still, I find this absolutely fascinating. Very similar in size to the Atacama humanoid that was found in the Chilean desert, a famous Atacama humanoid. There's also the Ataboy, which I think was made famous in the 1930s, which was a tiny person who was only about 6 or 7 inches tall. So we do have examples of this that have been found in desert areas on Earth, and they may be related to these little tiny people on Mars. They're about the same size, and they're very spindly and thin. But of course this is mummified, so it would be. So there we are, we've got a crazy bunch of things to look at here. They're not directly related, but they're in the same area, and look very similar to some of the crazy things that some of our ancient cultures were doing, or had, on Earth. So the question is, did the ancients of South America, from Peru and also places like Mexico, were they from Mars? Or did they, when they disappeared, did they go to Mars? And are what the things we're seeing on Mars the remnants of some of our culture that left Earth? So that's something to think about. And as I've said before, when the credible explanations no longer fit, the incredible must be at least considered. Okay? Thanks for watching, everybody. Food for thought. Check all the links in the description below, as usual. Please share it on social media if you can, on Twitter and on Facebook. I'll see you soon.